Thank you for coming. We are talking today about technical writing, and the idea is to share a few tips to write like more interesting articles. Some. This is mostly some tips. Things you to consider when writing a technical article. We had like a previous article. Um, a previous talk. I think it was on December. I will leave the link in case you want to go and see that. We in that talk we covered a little bit more things about language. It was more like grammar heavy, and so if you like this one, you could check the other one and see because it has different content. So this will be more lightweight, I think, not so heavy on the English side. So this is more or less my plan for today. We'll talk about how to get good articles by giving value and reducing the effort for acquiring that information. We'll talk a little bit of SEO and some tools. So let's start by really saying that we have this program that Larissa talked about, where you can propose ideas and get published on the blog, and we get you get paid for your work. Um, let's talk the first talking point, which is about the audience. Some years ago, Microsoft did some research about the bounce rate, which means how people read online, how likely is a person to stay on a page, instead of clicking, opening it, and going back, and then the conclusion was that there's a high chance of bouncing back at the beginning, as soon as the person enters. And as time goes by, the chance of the people, going back reduces. So you get the more time the person spends on the page, the higher the chance that it will read your content. So there were like 3 points that are very important from this study. It was that the first 10 or 20 seconds are critical. This is the window you have to grab the attention of the person, your potential reader. In average, the page visits last less than a minute, so people don't read everything. They don't will they most people won't read the article from top to bottom. They will scan it and pick the parts they want. Um, So what I mean with this is that people online are different than people reading a book or a magazine because they're active, they're searching, and they're looking for a solution. They're thinking, they're looking for something that will solve a problem. So it's a different dynamic when people are online, and this is especially important, I think, for developers, which tend to be more focused, more like skeptical of pages that try to sell you products, or that are not that do not contain like examples or code or usable actionable information. So that's what, as writers, we should give them. um, this is from another study that came from a different group, that was an eye tracking study, and it shows where people spend most time reading what parts of an article. They found that there are very various shapes, but the default one is this, which is called the F shape, because it resembles an F. And here we can see where those 20 seconds are spent the most, which is the title and the first few paragraphs, and maybe if you're lucky, some headings. So we have 20 seconds to get the attention of the reader in this small space. So that's the challenge, we have. So the idea is how to you know tackle that challenge in this talk. One way, the thing I think is better, or that we should focus on, is to maximize this ratio, which I call like the engagement ratio, which is how much value the article has and how much effort it takes to read it. This is effort for the reader, not for the writer. Uh, the thing is to minimize the effort for the person reading your article. So let's start with the value. Uh, The idea is to give something that will help, will solve a problem, will answer a question. And I think the first thing we need to realize when starting some research and doing some when we're starting an outline or we're planning the article is to answer these three questions. You know, who is this article for, which will affect what kind of language and what topics we will cover. What do these people want? They will be coming for something. And what do I want as a writer? Maybe I want to share my experience, or maybe I want to like promote some framework I've been working it, or share my project, or sell something. So these things are like focusing questions that we should keep always in the back of our heads while we are writing and while we are planning. So I think for adding value, there are four things that are important: solving a problem, building trust, focusing on quality, and being able to grab the attention of the reader. Let's go each in each of these points. The first one is, people are task based, and developers, which is our audience, are very very much focused on getting something. They will want something for you to solve a problem, for you to teach them how to use some framework or to use some tool, or to maybe get learn some tool that will make them more productive. But it's always something practical. It's something that they can use in their work, in their projects. So if you do the way of increasing value is giving them something of value, that helps them to do something. In that way, giving something for readers to play with, like working code or a repository or a Gitpod or something that they maybe some fiddle, something that they can play with. It's also great if we can provide them with something to play with. The other thing that I think is important is that we are kind of uh, tired, I guess, of people trying to sell us stuff, or you're just saying that everything is marvelous and this product will solve everything. And I think we can like make a difference by building trust, by being objective, by being honest, by saying the pluses and the cons and the negatives. If we are talking about something, sometimes what something will not do is more important that what it will do. If you are talking about use cases, saying which cases are not good fits, I think it's sometimes more important that the use cases. And I think that's we need to balance, because no solution, no product, no platform, anything. There's nothing perfect that will fit any all solutions. Then another way of building trust is to having, if you are working and getting paid and you are like promoting, it should be clear that this is something, something you got paid for, or there's some relationship, some work relationship. If you are like sharing your articles in Reddit or in any other places, and then if you can back everything you say with some data, with some sources, that also is a good way of building trust. With quality, I mean that it's much better to have a shorter piece that's like concise, focus, that a longer thing that covers a lot of points. So getting the scope right is very important, and it's easier to start adding things, and then you get like a big page, a big post that goes, you know, all around. So this is where the focus on questions I thought earlier were like important. Trying to keep things on point. And then of course there's quality over when you use the way you use language, if you are having typos, if you are using correct grammar, and if you have like elements, visual elements that complement your text. It's just not text, you have something else. uh, the last point uh, about trying to give value is to get some way of grabbing the attention of the person. The elements, what elements do we have for a person to get and click on our article? We have basically the title, a description sometimes, and some picture. Those are the three elements we have before the person clicks on our article. So for example, let me give you two examples that I personally like. This is one called it's very clear what's the article is about. You don't even need to read the description. The picture says it all, and it's kind of nice, it looks nice. And if you have like this in a sea of articles, I think it grabs your attention. The other example is, I think, even better because it doesn't use a description. The picture like says everything you need to know. Uh, you see the picture, you don't even need to read the title. And it's a good way of like visually representing what your article is about. So there's no uh, formula for a good title. Like it works or it doesn't work, and I think for me it's one of the harder parts. So kind of leave it for the end, and have like various ideas and like take notes and pick one. But it's hard to find a good title. In general, I would say that there are a few tips, to keep them uh, on the good side. It's better to be the title to be short, by taking away things that we don't need. For example, here we took everything that is like parenthetical, that's like attached information that's not part of the news. This is like the classic news in a newspaper. This is important because you have a limited space normally in like search results. You also have a limited space in your tabs. If a person has lots of tabs open, they will not see the whole title. So keeping them short tends to work better. The other thing that's kind of key is to put the keywords, the most important words near the beginning, meaning that if you have a keyword, if you have something important you want to say, try to put them near the beginning, because not everyone will read the whole title. And if the title doesn't enter your like search results, at least the most important part will appear, and it's easier to get to know what the article is about by putting the important stuff near the beginning. The other thing I would say is simply try to make them short, without cliches, without extra information. Just be like direct and objective, and don't waste people's time trying to guess what the article is about. We have like two versions here. I think the correct version would be the second one. The first one is kind of you know uh, like a cliche. And the last thing important, I don't know if it's the last or there's one more, but that they should work out of context, because they will be shown out of context. So if this is an article that talked about Google search algorithm, and the first title doesn't really talk about that, doesn't say anything, it's too generic, and it doesn't, maybe it makes sense once you read the article, but it doesn't work on its own. So even though the second title is longer, it's better because it works without you know having read the article. And the last tip here for title is to try to give some, some action, some thing that will, what will the reader do with this information, so this is the part of saying that the title, the article is about this, and you will be able to do this other thing. You will be able to maybe be more productive or build some application, make them about how they will help them. So let's see a couple of bad examples. In my opinion, we saw a couple of good examples. One, I found it in like one of those news aggregators. And, this is what I talked about, the title being too long, because you really don't know what this is about. In the description talks about Figma. You may recognize the Figma logo. The complete title is this: is making a complex design system with Token Studio for Figma, and I think it's too long and has the problem of the important things are near the end. So there's like my suggestions would be like these three versions. I think would work better. There's obviously a lot of combinations, but by making it them shorter and putting things near the first part of the title, we get, I think, a better title. And this is kind of going really just, abusing the title length. We are. This is an article about some open source something. The complete title, the worst thing here is that the image is not. You cannot read, it's not legible, and you cannot read what this is about. So it doesn't even work in that the image. The complete title is this one is like really really long. So my correction would be to use like keywords, like this may be related to observability, so we can use that keyword, or bring forward the title of the project and say what it is right away. So there's kind of ways of fixing long titles. So let's say we got the click and the person entered our article. How do we keep them in the article? And this is, remember the F shape uh, picture we saw earlier. We have like the first few paragraphs to grab the attention. These paragraphs are the lead or the lady. They're different terms, but basically this is your chance to tell someone, your potential reader, what this article is about, and convince them, to go ahead and read it. So, so I think okay. So let's see a few things that the lead should be doing. It should tell the article what the article is about, and it should tell the reader why it should read it, because otherwise what's the point? So there are no formulas. It's like the titles. I think titles and the leads are like the most time I spend on when writing. Like I go back and try different things, and you when you see that it works, and sometimes it doesn't work. There are a few tips that may help you. So it depends on the type of article, but sometimes telling a story, telling some facts, trying to go against the people's expectations, like saying something bad about something that everyone thinks is good, trying to there are different tactics, that we can use. If at the very least you should talk about what the article is about in very short form, like, and it's a good idea to show what you will get after reading. If you are building an application, maybe you can put screenshot of the final uh, state of your application, or if you are, for example, trying to optimize your Docker image size, you can show like a graphic with, before and after this, following these tips, something that, says, okay, this is what you will get. And it helps you get the attention of the people that are interested. And it doesn't waste the time of people that maybe came looking for a different thing. So it helps you in those two ways, So we talked about value, and now we'll talk about the effort. Now, how do we minimize the effort of people getting and consuming our content? So here we are going to try to minimize the effort part of this formula. And let's go back here. What this image is telling us is that people tend to focus on the first paragraph and a little bit on headers, subheaders. Visual elements are also part that make an article easier to parse and to read. And remember that people will not read the whole thing in general. They will like scan the article and find the parts they want. So we should have that into consideration and make them uh, is them like giving visual cues like headings, subheadings, non-text elements like graphics, code, list. There are a few elements that lets us structure the article in a way that without even reading, you can like scroll and see, where each part of the article is, what the general structure. For example, if we have one article that's just text, it's very hard to parse. But if we have an article that has graphics and lists and headings and it's well structured and doesn't have a wall of text, that helps a lot. I'm going to show you now two pages, which are real pages, and I want you to think which, in your opinion, it's easier to read. Uh, uh, you won't be able to read the text because it's very tiny, but just by looking at it, you can kind of kind of realize the structure. One is an article about, you have to read it, but it's about ChatGPT. It's basically a list of things. The other is a tutorial from one web framework, and you can see without on the right side, you can see without even reading, the structure. You see like an image of an application, then some commands. So okay, this is how I install them. Then you see code. Okay, these are code examples. You without even reading, you have an idea. And I think this is powerful because it helps people scan the text, decide if it's a good fit, if it's what they're looking for, and to find the part they're interested, because a lot of people will come back, especially with technical documents, will read it once, do something, and go back, try to pick it up or look for some detail they missed. So that it's important to use this to keep the scannable nature of the article in mind. One of the things that I like to use a lot is graphics, because they help a lot to 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 avoid typing, to write less. For example, this is one article about one web server, and it's very basically explain how the request flow, they come, they go, they come, and the timing. And if I had to write this in a paragraph, it would take a lot of words and it would be harder for a person to understand. So there are things that are very good fit for graphics or diagrams. One thing that I think is important is when you see that you have like 5, 6 paragraphs in a row, or very long paragraphs, think if you can replace some of that with something like a graphic or a list or an example or something like that, because it's very likely you don't need that many paragraphs to explain something. There are like different methods that are best suited for different kind of information. So another thing that, since we're discussing non paragraph elements, is lists. uh, we use lists in many ways. It's a good practice is to use them to break paragraphs. So the first example, it's a list of it's one sentence with a lot of elements, and breaking the paragraph into a list makes it more readable, more scannable. So it's a good practice to have that in mind. When you have three or more, normally more than three, it's a good candidate for a list. The other thing about lists to look nice should be that they have a similar length. So here's an example of things where this is not happening. We have like one word, the other a long sentence, two sentences. So if we can make them work, in a way that they more or less the same length, they also help you help the reader like understand everything without so much effort. The other tip for this is more related to maybe grammar, but the leading sentence should make sense with the elements in the list. Here's an example where this is not happening. We are telling people to obey some rules, but only the first element is a rule. The other are like warnings or statements. So it's kind of this is sometimes it makes people go back, read one item, go back, and and try to make sense of this because it doesn't have like it doesn't make sense, the sentences. So we should try to put them in a way that you could put each element attached to the first line and it makes sense. So here's the rule way of, the these are really the rules, and they're written in a way that's more clear. So the other thing that this is kind of a bonus, but I think it's a nice to change the first word in your list. So here in this example we have three items starting exactly the same, and let's see what happens when we change the first word. And I think it's much more nicer. I think, and it's not boring basically. It's more has more variety. So let's see. Okay, that's all I had to say about lists, at least for now. The other thing that will help us to reduce the effort, I think, is logical and like obvious. But if you make the article shorter, it will take less time and less effort to read it. There are two ways of doing that. We can either take parts out, or we can replace words with simpler alternatives. You know, there's no like hard and fast rule, but there's some guidelines, because people like short-term memory has a limit, and when you have shorter sentences, shorter words, shorter everything, it's easier to keep it in your head and process it. This is a little bit guidelines. It's not a rule, but usually if you keep between these values, it will work excellently. You can obviously go beyond or beyond that, but in general, I think in average, this is a good like rule of thumb. So here are a few examples. Sorry, about removing words, because these are uh, uh, parts where words are not doing work, and we can take them out. And the other talk I have kind of focus a lot on cases like this. So if you like this kind of things, you can check my other talk. Um, but the other thing about Word is not only that taking out words is important, but simplifying them is also important. You don't need to use complex language in general to explain complex things. Using complex words usually creates like a bar. A lot of people may not be English native speakers like me, so having difficult words don't help anyone. Maybe it helps your ego as a writer, but it doesn't help the reader to assimilate. So here again, some example of words that have easier alternatives that really there's no reason to pick the hard the hard alternative, unless maybe you need to like a synonym. You said too much one word and you want an alternative word. But in general, I think the shorter and simpler is best. So the other thing, this is something that I started paying attention more lately. How we use links in our articles. And there are a few things that I just did some research and I found interesting tips about how to use them better because they are easy to misuse. So there are like 4 S's. They should be specific, they should be sincere, they should be substantial, and they should be succinct. So got those words right. When I say specific, I mean that it should say where you are going to. You should clearly say what you're linking. Instead, like it's very easy to say go here or learn more, but those are doesn't they're not specific. They could be anything. So when you can put what you're linking to, what you help, the person to know if they need to click that or not. The other tip is to be sincere. For example, if we are offering some like free ebook and we say go here to download it and the person sees a form to fill, it's kind of deceiving, I think, and it's kind of annoying. So if we are sincere, we should say instead of download it is sign up for download it, make it clear it's not going, there's some extra step. The classic thing is when you have like a sales page and you say demo, you try a demo and it opens like a calendar and you need to book a call with someone to do the demo. It's kind of deceiving because it makes sense, it makes it seem like you can try it now, but no, you have like a barrier. uh, well, substantial, when we're talking about substantial links, they should work out of context, more or less. The first thing I said, that if you only read the link, it should be clear where you are going. So even this link that is like longer, it can work on its own. You can like take the rest of the elements and it still works. So it's a good practice to have that in mind. And the last is to be succinct or short, but without sacrificing the other 3 S's. So don't make them longer unnecessarily. Okay, so I think that's more or less what I had to say about trying to get a good article, more engaging, more interesting, and more with higher chances of getting it read and clicked. The other thing that I wanted to cover here in the talk is that a little bit of SEO. There's like people are giving like course and writing books about SEO, so we are going to only touch a little bit, like scratch the surface. But I think that if we do some research before we start writing, it can help us rank better on search engines. Uh, Maybe it's not for every case. If we are like writing a personal blog and we are just typing out our thoughts, maybe we don't care about that. But if we want people to like find our content on Google, this is a good thing to at least consider, having in the mind while planning and doing the research. What I mean with that is that you have a keyword and you want your article to appear as high as possible. If you are not on the first page, it's kind of uh, problematic because very few people go past the first page. So the ideal solution or the ideal condition is that you are first for a given word or keywords. So first thing you need to think about is when you start writing, to write down keywords which are things that people would search and find your article. So here are a few examples. There's there's no single keyword that's best. It's a good idea to write down many different alternatives, and then use some tool to get some the search volume, so you can test each of one of these and see how many monthly searches are for that keyword. And normally we pick the one that seems higher. There are a few tools. There are a lot of tools online. Some are paid, some are free. I like to do the first three more. They're the ones I use most, but they change. They people their new tools releases. Some have like trials, some are paid. So find one that works for you, and use it to search volume for given keywords. The second here one is Google Trends. For example, Google Trends doesn't tell you the search volume, but it does tell you how a keyword interest change over time, which I think is a good information to have. Like it gives you a time graph with interest, so you can see if the interest on something is growing or not growing. So it's a good way of picking also interesting topics. You can also use this to uh, to to find what you will write about. Looking different things and saying, "Oh, this is interesting. People are interested in this. Maybe I should write an article about that." That's another like use case. The last item here is an extension that gives you information on searches, so you can search and you see how many searches were for that given result, and gives you some like extra information that I think it's useful to have. So there are a few things that we can uh, miss, when doing SEO. One is not doing SEO at all. I think we should spend maybe a little bit of time before writing, doing this. And one of the things I see is that some people try to create new terms, and that it doesn't work because no one is looking for those terms because you just invented them. So call things by their name, and use the most popular name or most popular reference you can find. The other thing is that once you identify a keyword, you should use them frequently, depending on the length of the article, but at least on the title. You can use them in headings, in the first paragraphs, sprinkled through the article. You can use them in captions for images, in the alt text for images. So, in general, if you use it more, it will tend to rank better for that keyword. Uh, that's at least the theory. No one really knows how Google algorithm really works, but those are what we generally consider good ideas. One of the things that also I think we miss normally when writing is that graphics have two kinds of text that can be attached to it. One is the caption, which is the subtitle, and the other is the alt text, which is the text that is used by, for example, people with visual deficiencies problems, online readers, that you know read the description of the image. And the other thing is that this text is also parsed by Google, so it's another place we can put information that we probably we read by Google and will help people with some disabilities, for example. Let me show you here an example. This is the same graphic I showed you earlier. And we have the caption, which is like complementing the image, maybe helping or doing some description, but it's basically something more. It helps you identify what you are seeing. And the alt text is different. Is if you are going to tell a person that's not able to see your screen, how would you textually convey that information? So it normally is longer and it's more detailed, and you need to have those two things into consideration. Do not mix them. I think the what's common is to put uh, in the alt text to put a caption. Like if I put the text and the caption in the alt text, it will not help a person which is not able to see the image because it doesn't tell you what the image is about. I think the confusion sometimes comes when we are using Markdown to write, which is pretty common format. You have like brackets to write some text. That brackets is the alt text. It's not the caption. If you want a caption, you need to do something else. So ideally, you want to put within brackets the long form, the explanation of the image. Yes. So whatever you do, I don't think you should leave it empty. If you can put something uh, and you use keywords, also helps you with SEO and helps everyone. So let's see. We may do some or another maybe talk about SEO later in the future, but I think that's for now. That's okay. Let's see a few things. If you want to are interested in learning more, uh, here's a few pages. About things to consider: punctuation, grammar. I know tips for accessibility. And there I think good resources to check. There's also books. Obviously, there's a handbook for technical writing, which I found out a few like recently. It's basically like a Bible with dictionary format. You have words for concepts and explains you things like it can maybe say you the correct way of doing of using a verb, or it can talk about alt text. It has everything. It's like a very good uh, manual, not to read from back to top entirely, but to have it as a reference. And if I had to pick another book to read, it would be the second one, which is about all of these books are about nonfiction. The second book is like a classic in nonfiction writing, and it has like hundreds of tips, how to improve write and use English. So if you are interested in reading, here's a few ideas. Let's talk a little bit about tools. Graphics, you can use whatever graphic tools generating you want. I like Whimsical. There's Canva. There's Figma. There's a page with like I don't know 1,000 more tools here in Infinite Canvas. So whatever you like to make diagrams, make graphics, you can also get graphics from stock photos or unsplash.com, or maybe do something with these new DALI things, make graphics, but there's a lot of alternatives to make graphics and captions and diagrams. The other thing is for when dealing with text, we need some way of checking our grammar. Grammarly is like the classic tool. It has like a free tier that works very well. A language tool has more languages. It's not only English, so it has different types of languages. There's Quillbot that is like learning. No, it's yes, it's like an AI. It's like a language model that you put some paragraphs and it rewrites them with different, you know, words, and lets you pick if you want to be more formal, less formal, and it's a good idea. Good way of when you're stuck, when you have something that you don't like, to put and get ideas. There's also Hemingway Editor, which is a page and an application. It's a website and an application, and it highlights difficult parts of the text with colors. Like sentences are red, yellow, blue. There are different colors, and you can like see if your article is where your article is doing things maybe harder than necessary. Then titles are also important to capitalize them correctly, which is not putting the first word of every the first letter of every word in capital. So there's application for that. And then obviously there's all the new things that are coming for generating text, rewriting, doing research. We may do some later on talk about that. I would like to maybe do something how we can use that in our jobs. But for now, let's only mention it. The other thing also that's I think it's important to keep in mind is before sending your draft, for correction, is to do some difficult level test, which basically there are many formulas to calculate how easy or hard the text is to read, and for example, they usually go and link the result to like a level in school, so you have 8 level uh, text, you have 12 level text. Beyond 12, we are talking about people that are going to college or writing like scientific papers. So in general, we want to keep them between 8 and 12 are reasonable values. I think easier is better. This is the lower the value, the easier is to read. There are tools online to calculate this, and there are some of the tools that I mentioned, like Grammarly or Hemingway Editor, do that for you. They will give you the result. So, and then, if I don't know what kind of language or format you use, but I think Markdown is very popular. I tend to use Vim. And I wrote a short article with plugins and things like that. You can use, there's a lot of markdown editors, so you can choose. Some are paid, some aren't. I want to give only say that the one I'm using most today is the last one, Obsidian, which is like a tool for taking notes. But you can also write articles, you can publish them, and you can even make slides. Uh, and the slides here, I made it with Obsidian. So this what you're seeing now is the one Obsidian window. So it's a good free tool to maybe check if you're interested. Um, so let me. This is the links for the previous talks. I gave you one last year, and there was one I gave here in Argentina. So it's Spanish, but they published in YouTube. So you will find these slides in the link I put in the chat, the Google Drive, so you can download the slides and check them out or go investigate a little bit more. So I want to thank you everyone for staying with me so long and keeping up with me. And I'm very happy you are here. And if you have any questions or want to talk with me, here like my Twitter, there's a blog and in an email.